Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and move over to the SC1 section, the Schlages. There's not really too many knockoff Schlage versions. Every now and again you'll find a bald one, but Schlage is pretty much just Schlage for the most part. It does use a different pinning kit, so I've got this set up. Schlage is actually 0 through 9 instead of 1 through 6. And I went ahead and took this off the door for us to save us a little time. It was just 2 screws like most of them, but it is worth noting that these screws are vertical instead of horizontal. So that's nice. One bad thing about these, if you don't have the key, you can't rekey it. You have to have the previous and existing key to be able to get it open. I'll show you how that works on this. So if they don't have a key for it, they will unfortunately have to replace the Schlage doorknob. But to get it open, we put the key in and turn it 90 degrees. It's as far as it'll go. And there's a little retainer right there. We're just going to depress that in. And the handle comes off. We're going to remove the key from it. And then we're just going to press the lock outwards. So this actually has a Bible with a spring top on it that compresses in as we put it in the lock and then pops back out when it's inside. Next up, we're going to take off the C-clip. And when I mentioned about them shooting pretty far, the Schlage doorknobs are a very big culprit of that. So we're going to put our key in. We're going to turn it 90 degrees. Again, that's as far as it'll turn on that. But if you look, the end of this one's a little bit funny shaped. It's kind of like a football. If you don't have it fully 90 degrees, you're going to catch some slack there and you're going to lose those top pins. So you have to make sure it stays at 90 degrees as you put the plug follower in. And be kind of gentle with these. They are a little bit rougher to get off. Alrighty. I lost the old pins, but that's okay because they were garbage anyways. I'll brush those out. Alrighty, and we're going to take our new keys, and the bidding is 63616. And I do want to point out, I don't know if you notice, I've got silver pins over here and everything else is green. The colors have nothing to do with anything. It's just different manufacturers when I order them at different times. Who knows what colors they send sometimes. But they are the same size 6s, the greens and the silvers in there. All right, so we're going to put it back in. And again, we want to make sure the top of that football is at the highest point so we don't accidentally dump the Bible. We're going to turn it. All righty, everything goes good. Put the C-clip back on there. And it's really hard to see inside here. I'm not really sure how I can show that on the camera, but there's a wall on the inside of this, except for one part that fits where the Bible would go. It's in person, it's pretty obvious to see, but you're just going to slide it in where that hole is. And I tend to put a key in there to kind of guide it, but you don't want to put it in all the way because you don't want the lock to actually turn. You just don't want to lose it in there. So then we're going to take it, we're going to put it back onto the handle. And since these are, since these are a little bit more free floating, like I said, you want to keep a key halfway in there to guide it, but not so far in there for the lock to actually turn. Then we're going to go past the retainer mark. And it's not fully in there yet. Once you get past that first click, you're going to put the key all the way in and turn it clockwise and press forward a little bit more, and you're going to hear another click. And that's how we know it's fully keyed. And you'll see the retainer pop back up. And the tailpiece is moving. After that, we just put it back in the door and do those 2 vertical screws and we are good to go. It is also worth pointing out that not all Schlage have that tab right there. Some of them have a small circle, but it's still just a retaining pin you push in. It's not an Allen key or anything like that. You just have to have the key at 90 degrees and then you can depress that in. Next up, we're going to work on a Schlage lever. And we'll go ahead and get started on that in just a second here. All right, guys, we're going to do a Schlage lever handle now. Very similar, just operates slightly different, so I want to show you. I've actually left it all together because you can actually take these apart without having to remove them from the door. So we're going to take our key, same as before, just turn it in there 90 degrees. And we're going to hit that little hole. That's where the depressor is. Like I said previously, some of them are holes, some of them are actually visible. So we're going to hit that. Pull the lever right off. Remove the key, and the lock body slides right out. We're going to remove the C-clip. Alrighty. And if you notice, it has that same football shape as before, except now the football is pointed upwards when it's in the locked position. So when we get it in the unlocked position, it's going to be sideways, which is going to cause us some problems to pull the lock out and keep all the top pins intact. So what I like to do with that is take a shim and go ahead and run it across the top so we don't accidentally lose those pins while we put the plug follower through. It kind of acts as a little bridge for us. So now we're going to dump our old pins. We use the same bitting as before. I believe it was 63616. Oops, don't need that 5. Six. 3. 6. 1. 6. Alrighty, and same thing going back. We're going to kind of push that shim in a little bit to give us a bit of a bridge as we slide it through. Plug follower, remove our shim, turn smoothly, remove the key, and again, I can't stress enough to push against the keyway when you're removing the key so you don't accidentally pull the whole chamber out. We're going to put our C-clip back on there. Drop our lock into the lever. Just let it slide back in there. We're going to get it most of the way in, and then we're going to put the key back in, turn that 90 degrees, and you can feel it click in there. Alright, and that one is all set now. Like I said, once you get used to it, you don't even have to take them off the doorway. Literally just put the key in and hit that depressor. It'll save you a lot of time just throwing that handle on instead of unscrewing the whole mechanism. And next up, we're going to work on a Schlage deadbolt. Alright guys, now we're going to remove a Schlage deadbolt. It comes apart the same by just removing the 2 back screws, but it goes in a little different, so I want to show you how it goes back in there when we're done. Pull that off. Alrighty. And inside a Schlage deadbolt, it operates a little bit different than everything we've been using so far. There's actually an extra machine screw in here that holds the lock into the housing. So we're going to remove this screw. Just going to set it to the side, and then we can pull the chamber out freely. After that, instead of a C-clip, this actually uses a tiny spring pin here that we push down and then unscrew. And it's going to have 3 parts to it in here. It's going to have the tailpiece, this washer, and the cap. And then we're going to remove the spring pin, and there's a smaller spring that's inside here. These are much smaller than our standard top spring pins. I'm sorry, top pin springs. So we don't want to lose that because we can't just replace it with one of the other springs we have. These are a little bit specialty springs. So then we're going to put our key in like normal, turn, run our plug follower through, and dump the pins. And I'm just going to use the same bitting that we've been using on the Schlage, the 63616. All right, everything's smooth and good in there. We're going to take it, we're going to put it back into the housing. Turn smooth. So then to rebuild it, we're going to take that smaller spring I mentioned earlier, drop it in, and then drop this pin in. You can feel a little spring tension there. And we're going to rebuild this. We're going to put the washer back around the tailpiece, and then drop that into the cap. And as we put it in this larger piece of the tailpiece, it's best to try to push that down onto that spring pin. To get it started a little bit, and then you can just hold the spring down and tighten it up the rest of the way. Now, two mistakes can be made pretty easily with these. One is if it's too tight, it's gonna turn really tightly. It's binding a little bit. If that's the case, loosen it one. And it's a lot smoother. Also, another issue that you'll run into with these is if it's too loose. It's too loose, it spins freely, but the key doesn't want to come out. That's because we've got too much slack there, so the pins aren't lining up to pull it out. So if that's the issue, you just tighten it back up a little bit. And basically just go back and forth till you find the sweet spot on them. All right. It's actually one too tight, I think. Let's loosen that one. I'm going to drop it back in, and then take that machine screw, put it back in. That way this is solid, not going anywhere. And then when we install it back on the door, so this tailpiece is a little bit different than others. Since it runs a further angle, you can actually put it in one of two ways. So you have to think to yourself, if the door is locked, which way will it turn to unlock? So it's going to go counterclockwise to unlock. So we're going to make sure it has enough room to go that way. So we're going to flip it this way. I'm going to drop it back into the hole. And we're going to check our work real quick, make sure that it... That was actually the wrong way. So I'm actually glad that happened, so we can see what happens when we do it the wrong way. It'll appear like it's working, but you can't actually remove the key. By the time you get back to the rest position, it pulls the bolt back in, so you can't actually lock the door, or sometimes it'll happen vice versa to where the bolt will stay out, but when you try to take the key out, the bolt won't go in. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip it, we're going to take it out, and we're going to spin the tailpiece going the other way. And line it back up in there. And now we'll try it. Now I can remove it with the lock out and unlock it and remove it with the lock in. So you just kind of got to pay attention to which way it's going to be turning before you install the thumb turn back on. Then we'll take the thumb turn, and typically Schlage, you kind of turn it halfway to get to the screws. Alright, everything goes smooth. Let's try it one more time to be on the safe side. Alrighty, so that one's all set. And there's one other style of Schlage deadbolt that I wanted to point out to you while we're here. So this one looks very similar. It operates the exact same as far as rekeying it, except it's got this arm on the back. The arm literally just pulls straight off. You access the pin, do the same thing we just talked about, and then throw the arm back on there. Put our machine screw back in. But when we put this in the door, the tailpiece isn't actually what's operating the lock. This arm is. So when we put it in, it's going to look a little like this. And the tailpiece will actually not be connected to anything below the lock. And the arm is going to go into that position. Depending on how deep the doorway cut is, it has one or two options. But we're just going to put it in that front one. And that's how it's going to operate. And those are the two main Schlage deadbolts you're going to encounter. Next up, we're going to talk about a little bit of troubleshooting and issues that will occur into the field. And we'll get to that in just a minute.